Howdy fam, welcome to another episode of Danger Fruit, coming to you from Wisconsin. P.S. The film that we're talking about in this episode has nothing to do with Milwaukee. I just happen to be here in town for work. But if I had done more research, we could have talked about the Family of Cops trilogy starring Charles Bronson. And on the surface, it appears to be a cop thriller drama, but really, it's a Western roller coaster of familial proportion. Anyway, this episode, we're going to be talking about Concrete Cowboy. This movie was from 2021. It was directed by Ricky Staub. It stars Idris Elba, Caleb McLaughlin, and Jarrell Jerome. Here's the one-sentence summary. Sent to live with his estranged father for the summer, a rebellious teen finds kinship in a tight-knit Philadelphia community of black cowboys. Let's start with the Fletcher Street Riders. This is the group of people this movie is based around. Black cowboys in the middle of present-day Philadelphia. More formally known as the Fletcher Street Urban Riding Club, they're a nonprofit that's devoted to inner-city horsemanship in North Philadelphia. But it's said that they can trace their start back to the early 20th century, where they were driving horse-drawn carriages, delivering food and milk and different materials like that, and some were even coming through driving cattle through the area, and later on, some even became jockeys and trainers for professional horse races. Now that topic is going to lead us into the more general topic of black cowboys in history. Historians estimate that 1 in 4 cowboys in the Old West was black, and a lot of them came from the Civil War era when their owners would go off to fight in the war. They would stay back and be left to maintain the land and the cattle. Then after the war's over, the Emancipation Proclamation gets signed, and then these are freed slaves who are highly skilled cowboys. And they were hired up so fast by ranchers. In popular culture, there are few representatives, but one of the most notable was Josh Dietz from the Lonesome Dove series, played by Donald Glover. My wife brought up a point during this movie that made my love for her grow so much deeper. She brought up how a common theme in Westerns is that the line between good and bad can be blurred, the anti-hero narrative. And that plays really well into this movie's hand. For example, in this movie, when they steal the horses in the name of tradition, they're doing a bad thing, but it's for a good reason. This movie shines in highlighting the Fletcher Street Riders, touching on their history and also spelling out how they've evolved and then what their purpose is even today. Gaining this exposure to this group and their lifestyle was a gateway enough for me that I really wanted to dig in and learn more about the group. I found it fascinating that Philadelphia and maybe the urban culture that you might associate with it and all that encompasses would collide with something like the lifestyle of the cowboy, and then both of them come together to be so seemingly and proudly embraced. I loved how this cowboy history was this group's history, who we wouldn't think of traditionally when we think of the Old West and cowboys. But they are so proud and allow this to be interwoven into their culture and their history, which I think is something that's beautiful about the times that we're in now, is that we're more willing to find stories like this and highlight them and give them life, where this may give us a whole new perspective on something that we really thought we had a good grasp on, like the Old West, thanks to traditional popular culture. I think this movie stood on a shaky plot. It was enough to get us from beginning to end, but I mean, it was nothing that was really going to blow your mind. I think the characters in this movie were really interesting, and their dynamic was enough that, would get me interested to watch the movie. But after like 30 minutes, it just sort of faded away to where I realized I was sort of just watching how things unfolded and holding on until the end of the movie. Great subject matter here. I'd never heard about the Fletcher Street Riders, and I had no idea the history that goes along with this subculture. I love films that entertain but also inform, and I feel like Concrete Cowboy was set up really well to do that. They had really interesting subject matter and a premise that really sounds like it could be made up, but the fun part of it is that you get towards the end of the movie and you find out no, this is a real thing that actually exists in the world. I will say, I felt kind of awkward watching the street narrative collide with the cowboy narrative. I don't know if that's because I've just never seen it before, or if because there's just harsh distinctions in my mind because of how these two things have been portrayed over the years.